Yeah, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, okay, guys. So ooh, all right, guys. So welcome. My name is John, and today I'll teach you about Zmodeler. Okay, so wait, before we begin, I don't like the crunchiness of this look. Okay. Right. Okay. So I have done before. This is my Zbrush model done like with using Zmodeler, right? So let's take a quick look at what Zmodeler can do, right? So this is topology in Zbrush, right? Majority of the time, okay, so what in the first place is Zmodeler, right? Majority of the time when you are sculpting in Zbrush, right, you will tend to have let's see, let's go and open up something. Let's the most of the time when you are sculpting in Zbrush, you tend to have very crunchy looking topology, right? Something like this is what you will typically see when you open up somebody's wireframe, right? But this kind of topology is not usable at all, especially if you need to bring it to other softwares like Maya or Substance where you are required to unwrap, right? And this is just not usable at all, right? It's too high res, right? What most of the time other softwares, they want something like this, something manageable and very reasonable for them to process. Okay. So this is where we bring in Zmodeler. Okay. So Zmodeler is in essence Maya inside Zbrush. Okay. So I will just bring in a quick cube, append in a quick cube, right? I think most people are familiar with this. Okay, so this is what typically the cube look like in Maya, but it's got pretty shitty topology, right? So typically whenever I start a Zmodeler project, I want a very low res cube. So you can find under initialize, right? Q cube, Q sphere, Q grid. I typically just use Q cubes. It makes a very clean and basic cube for me. Right? It's gone inside the center of the world. Right? Maybe I'll hide my Gundam or I'll open up a new thing. Right? Right? So we have a Q cube. Right? This is very different from what you typically will append in Maya in ZBrush, because the ZBrush spheres and cubes and not, or ZBrush base meshes are very high in resolution, but this one brings me up a very simple and low resolution mesh that I can work with. Okay, so Zmodeler is exactly like I said, exactly like Maya, in the sense that it works more or less the same, except I find it faster. Right, so in order to, I'll show you what I mean. Right, so we press B to open the brush menu, Z and M for Zmodeler. Right, typically the hotkeys work by initials. So brush menu, Zmodeler, ZM. Right, and this opens up our Zmodeler brush. So how do we even access or even use it? Right, now, if you are familiar with Maya, you are familiar with the basics of 3D modeling. You have your face, you have your faces, you have your edges, you have your vertexes, right? These three things. Now, in Maya, you do need to often like right click and go into different modes in order to access different parts of your mesh. But in ZBrush or in Zmodeler, all you need to do is you hover your mouse over the aspect that you want to adjust, and it will automatically switch between face mode, edge mode, and vertex mode. So this is the beauty of Zmodeler. Also, the fact that ZBrush itself is not capable of generating n-gons. This is why I prefer to use ZBrush over Maya, in the sense that when I do my Booleans or when I'm doing all sorts of whatever procedure, there is 0% chance of it generating any n-gon. So I can really, really model to my heart's content, and it will be fine, right? So the thing about, so how we use it is we simply put our mouse over which aspect we want, then we press the space bar, and it will open up this Zmodeler menu. So over here, take note, right? There is this thing called polygon actions, right? And I put it over a face. When I put it over edge and I press the space bar, edge actions. And I put it over a vertex, it says point actions, right? So in that way, I can access all the different things just by putting my mouse, and it will do whatever I want it to do, right? So let's go and take a look at this, right? Before I do, I always like to, also another important aspect of Z modeling procedure is your polygroups. So it's always very important to organize your polygroups properly. So I often have group by normals whenever I start a project. If not, it is typically like very messy later on. You'll be happy that you organize your shit properly, right? So we have this, right? Another thing that's important is typically you will use under your, another tool I use often is under your deformations, right? We have polish, polish by feature, polish by group, polish by crease edges. So I tend to keep polish by groups and polish crease edges. Polish by groups that you polish, polishes the whole object overall. I get a nice sphere if I want to, right? Polish by groups lets me straighten out the faces that are polygrouped properly, right? And polish crease edges, so I can, let's see, let's subdivide this thing a little bit more, right? So I can polish to make back my sphere, right? And then typically I will use, I will go and use this additional tool called the crease function under geometry. So these are, take note, these are all the tools that I use all the time when I'm doing, in a sense, Z modeling procedures, right? So I can crease my polygroups. So you can see that polygroups are very essential when I do modeling this way, right? Then I can sharpen down the edges. I can polish back the groups, right? I can polish down the faces. So I can get, so this is the secret to get hard, crisp edges in ZBrush. Typically, most ZBrush modeler, they will have very soft results when they are ZBrushing, whereas I can get my hard surfaces, see, when I'm doing my Z modeling, right? If I do by polish by groups and polish by crease edges, I can get my hard surface results when I sculpt. Right, so let's get back to this. So Zmodeler, let's go back down to a lower resolution, right? So Zmodeler has a lot of functions. So you push your space bar on top. So Zmodeler is typically divided into a few sections, right? So if you put your mouse on top, you can explore all these different options. But what they mean is like it's a sequence of events that will tend to happen. So let's say I'm at my polygon actions. It's basically my face action. So when I'm at a face, what do I want to do, right? I want to add to curve. I want to bevel, bridge, crease, delete, do nothing, equalize, extrude, flip edge, inflate, blah, 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 move, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of functions that you can do when you're at a face mode, right? So for example, I'll press extrude. Now, the second thing we take note of is the second box, the target box. So we are going to, when our mouse is on a face, it's going to extrude. And extrude what? We can extrude a single poly, all polygons, quads, triangles, blah, 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 a whole variety of things, right? Typically, I would like to use a lot of polygroups, polyloops, polygroup islands, polyloops, and things like that. And then we have our additional modifiers. So different brushes or different modes do a lot of different things, right? So in this case, I'll show you a polygon action, extrude a single poly, right? So if I want to do it, I can just, so what it does is when I'm on the face mode, it's gonna, okay, so it's tell me this, right? So typically, I don't really do this at the start. Let's go and delete all the history first. Okay, so we can go and extrude, right? We can extrude whenever we are encountering a face. So I can do exactly what I do in Maya, but doing ZBrush is a lot more efficient. So I can just model like that. I can just pull out shapes, right? Now the beauty of Zmodeler inside ZBrush is that you are not just constrained to your Maya tools, right? Always, you never forget that you can also access the rest of your regular ZBrush brushes, like your move tool, right? Or your smooth or your whatever brushes you want. So you have your soft brushes as well as the hard sort of movement you have within ZBrush, right? Within the Zmodeler function. Okay. So this is that, right? So another useful function is always the EZM. Right? Another function is the polygroups that I tend to use a lot, polygroup by polyloop. So the thing about building stuff in Zmodeler is that I find that using subdivision modeling, I can really go and get all the things I want properly. The topology is all nice and proper. Right? So wait, let me go and change this. Yeah, change the color of my polygroup. Right? So then I'm going to extrude polygroup islands. So we can extrude out stuff like that, right? And we can do really very complicated shapes depending on what we want to do with our Depends on what we want to do, right? So this is this thing, right? So now let's go back to our original thing. Now I'll show you a bit more who functions with that. You can delete this cube, right? So I have a Gundam here that I built previously, right? Let's see. Right, so I'll show you this a bit more complicated function. Yeah. Let's take this visor. Right. So this visor, if you build it in, so another thing about Zbrush Zmodeler is that you can build, or what I find good about it is that I can build very complex curved surfaces with the Zmodeler function. Let me in fact bring up an older file so that we can see how I actually managed to make this thing. Right. Let's take this. Right, and let's see how we go from this to that. Right, so you can see that this is an older version of that visor, and this is a new version with the panel lines I've cut inside, right? So how do we even manage to get this from basic Zmodeler? So this one I built, I think it's clear to see that I use whatever I teach just now to build the basic shape, right? You start with a cube, then you stretch it out using the move tool or extensions, and then you just inset and subdivide or whatever it is. And then I still can, right, build I can, after I've done building the basic shape or building the basic block out in Zmodeler, right, that's when I tend to go and move up into the higher resolution and still do these things to smooth it out. Right, so let's actually delete all the levels so we can see how we're going to get it smoothed. Right, so let's see, right? So I think it's quite automatic. I mean, most of the time when you start, right, your things typically tend to be like messy in polygroup. That's why I say doing the polygroup is quite an essential part of Z modeling, right? And group by normals is what I tend to use a lot. So just a simple click of the group by normals, and you can see that all the different faces of my object are colored differently, right? And that allows me to choose each face or whichever plane that I want to affect, right? Yes, if you don't, right? If you don't, and then you polish by groups, you tend to just kind of destroy everything when you smooth it, right? So we don't want that. We want to maintain that kind of shape. So we group by normals, and for extra bonus, I also like to under geometry, right? I like to crease my polygroups also. So I uncrease also. Typically I'll crease my polygroups as well, right? So that it maintains that shape. So when I go and add my subdivisions, right? Because this whole like pink face is one face, it will tend to average out for me automatically, right? This teal face will average out itself automatically for me. If you were to do this in Maya, right? Shifting vertexes one by one on a curved surface is very difficult and very troublesome, right? And it's really, you don't really get the effect that you want. But if you do it like this, then the power of ZBrush and polygroups that Maya does not have, right, really benefits a lot, right? So let's now make the visor the same shape as my final result. So my original visor is a bit squashed. Let me just go and auto group. I don't really need this. So another thing, auto groups lets you quickly move up and down or hide stuff that you don't really want to affect. Right, so I'm going to just hide all this stuff that I don't need. I just want to focus on this part, right? And because I polygroup it, it's one mesh, right? But I polygroup it according to its different components, so I can access it very quickly, right? Perhaps you even can split it apart, split hidden, so it's there if I need it. Right, currently I don't need it, right? So we want to make this with resolution into this, right? We want to reshape everything, right? So we can of course use our Zmodeler transpose edge, right? We can use our Zmodeler to go and help to shift for us as we would in Maya, right? So this one I think is very self-explanatory. We can do it like that. We can go and shift it, right? We can go and shift whatever you want to do, right? In Maya, typically you will have to shift edge by edge, right? But in ZBrush, you have the power to go and do it edge by edge, or you can do by whole entire object. So I also tend to use the regular brushes, right? Don't forget that you have access to all of these that you can affect your changes very quickly, right? It's a lot more of a hassle inside Maya, but over here it's quite straightforward. Right? So I can adjust, right? If you would like to have a little bit more precision, right, you can also use the Zmodeler, right? Another good one is slide your edges, right? So I can really just use the slide to go and shift stuff around, right? I can do this sort of adjustments in Zbrush, right? In Maya you can do it too, but I find it faster, right? Okay, to go and fast forward again, move this edge, right? So I can really make very fast hard surface or very basic adjustments using Zmodeler, right? Right now our thing is off symmetry already. Let's go and bring it back. Where's it? Modify topo mirror. Right. So let's say we mirror and weld. Then now we have this kind of weird problem that we don't want, right? So we just go and mirror it the other way, and it will fix itself. Yeah, okay. So we got it back, right? So we have a thing like that, right? So now that we have this base shape, so always remember whenever you are modeling, whichever software package you want to use, be it Maya or Zbrush or anything else, is always going to work by a big, medium, small type principle, right? So you have your basic shape, your blocking, and then you go on to your medium shapes, and then you go on to do details later on. So right now, before I even want to, if I go and if I divide right now, right? Okay, it gives me quite good results. I say uncrease everything. If I divide right now, you're going to see that I'm going to have this very soft looking effect, which is not what I want for my hard surface, especially since the edges are soft, right? The edges are soft. I want the hard edge, right? So if we divide again, it's just going to get softer and softer with more and more subdivision, right? Of course, you can use trim dynamic, right? You can use trim dynamic to flatten it out. You know, if you are more familiar, but it's not as clean, you see. It's not perfect. It's not as clean as doing it properly, right? So this is where I start to go and use the tools that at my disposal, right? So first things first, as per usual, polygroup by normals. So of course, perhaps the normals are a bit more soft. So we can always adjust the, if you want to find where's the group by normals, where it normally is, right? It's under your polygroups, polygroups here, right? So you can have auto groups, group by normals, group visible, group, all your various group functions, right? So I tend to use group by normals, and then here is a angle, a degree where they will start to differentiate between groups, right? So if I press this, yeah, okay. So group by normals, okay. Right, sometimes it's not, sometimes the angles are a bit funny, but you can still do it by hand, right? We can go back to our Zmodeler, polygroup, let's say single polygon, right? So I can go and group, right? So now all of my faces are of different colors, right? That's when I, again, go to my geometry and I crease polygroups, right? So that lets the system know that these are the creases or these are the hard edges that I want, right? I'm going to flatten out this, transpose polygroup island. So that means that anything that is a single polygroup will be affected by my brush. So I'm going to transpose the green islands, right? I'm going to make it flat, right? I'm going to adjust it like that. So I can adjust a whole, an entire face by myself, right? So this is where it differs from Maya. Maya, you have to click face by face to go and adjust, right? And then it's not even. Whereas in ZBrush, if you polygroup all your, if you go by a workflow where your planes are all same color, right? Typically when you're doing a hard surface like a robot, it's very planar, right? So you polygroup all of this stuff. This is considered one plane, right? I can really I can just make adjustments like that, and it keeps that shape throughout, right? BZM, let's say we take this face, right? I'm gonna flatten out this angle, right? I'm gonna flatten it this way, scale it flat. Then I'm going to just rotate the whole entire face this way, right? Then BZM, right? I'm going to take the edge, transpose, edge loop complete, right? So I can move an entire edge loop, right? So right now so I'm now being able to affect this entire edge loop this way, right? So I can really make my edge loop adjustments to go and build whatever that I want for my hard surface model, right? And of course, now this thing has shifted. I'm gonna keep this here, right? Over here, I'm gonna shift it, right? And then perhaps scale it and rotate it. Right, so you can see that I'm able to affect things extremely quickly using Zmodeler. In Zbrush, you have to press it you have to select faces one by one, and you don't really have the power to go. In Maya, you don't have the power to go and move all this stuff so quickly, but in Zmodeler you can, right? That's the power of it. And you can still use your regular brushes. So now I have this shape that I like, right? Perhaps I may choose to polish by groups just to even it out. Oh, okay, maybe not. Right. So now here's the thing where it's a little bit more soft skill. It's not a hard and fast rule, right? Zmodeler or polish by groups, polish, crease, edges, and polish, they work by averaging out your faces or your planes, right? Or your resolution, right? So sometimes if you polish by groups, you may not get the thing you want. So in order to combat that, in order to help you with your polishing, you typically need to tell Zbrush, give Zbrush a bit more help and tell them roughly what's the shape you want. So that's when I will go into my geometry box, and then I start to divide. I always turn off the smooth, because if you turn on the smooth, it will just move everything. So I typically turn it off, right? So I have one division here. Then when I polish by groups, it gives me a better result than before, right? I have more curves because I have simply more resolution, right? Can divide again, right? You can just see it, right? And I can have more and more of a smoother polish, right? So as you go up and down, so I can go up and down and really get that thing that I want, right? Now the thing about Zmodeler is that once you add subdivisions, you can't really use a Zmodeler anymore. So I tend to use Zmodeler a lot for the basic blocking, but you know, blocking is like about 80% of the whole thing, right? Once your blocks are finished, all that refinement is really just refinement, and you will not really be making big adjustments anymore. But you still, although I say that, you still can make your adjustments. So let's say I want to adjust this polygroup, right? I still am able to make this kind of adjustments, right? So then I can just polish back by groups, right? To go and bring it back up there, right? So this is some basic, this is how you can make your hard surface very clean hard surfaces in Zbrush, right? So we can go and divide again, 5 subdivisions, active points at 10,000, right? Then I can polish by groups to really get that smooth hard surface effect that I want in Zbrush, totally in Zbrush, right? I can do my armor, right? And then also, you know, never forget that you still have access to this. So after you're done your hard surface armor and you want to sculpt in some details, you still can go ahead and do all this kind of hand sculpted details. Typically, I don't sculpt panels and stuff. I want to make armor trim on my armor, I will do that in Zmodeler. Typically, what I use the brushes for will be to make things like your battle damage or stuff like that. You can scratch the armor and stuff like that, right? So this kind of brush work is what I typically will go and brush onto my armor, these kind of organic scratches and whatnot. But the base armor building is all using Zmodeler, right, to build something clean, right? So of course, if I don't like it, I can polish it back away, right? I can go back down, of course, go back down to polish, go back up, polish some more, clean it up if I don't want it anymore, right? So because it's all polygroups and I also crease the edges, right? The system knows where's the hard edge and where's the soft edges. So on this surface, no soft, all everything is soft. On this one, all hard, right? So I've got this, right? So now so that is Zmodeler in a nutshell, right? So yeah, and any questions? Oh, panel lines. How do I do panel lines? Okay, good question, right? So if I want to do panel lines, typically I will do it separately, right? If you want to do panel lines, that's a lot of more, that's a more like in-depth process. So we can still, let's see, what's the best way to go about doing it. How do I do panel lines? Okay, so panel lines, typically you will need, so let's take an example of another panel line thing that I did, right? So this one is a bit more complex. These are all panel lines that are done previously, right? Let's see, right? Doing panel lines like this actually require a variety of steps. Okay. Where's my file? This one. Right. So okay. So if you want to do panel lines on your armor or whichever is it, whatever the case you want to do, right? You need to do it through a cutting away process, right? So example, right? I want to cut panel lines onto this thing. First things first, I mean, it's also another order of operations type thing, right? I tend to duplicate, in case I do need to take back my base mesh, right? I tend to duplicate it, and then I will tend to go and delete all the subdivisions. So now it is a high-res mesh, right? Panel lines is a whole different process where I typically need to go and just keep it flat, and then I'll extrude later. So the thing about panels, building your panel lines is, of course, it's easy to build it off a base mesh. So you have your base shape. That is going to be your template for your panel lines like later on, right? So I will typically cut out and then I do it as a flat plane, delete all your hidden, and I don't need the subdivisions anymore because my subdivision file is still like kept over here somewhere, right? So then we can start to go and design our panels, right? Typically you can most of the time people will use the masking and cutting method, right? So I will cut out, let's design some panels. Right, let's just come up with some panel looking stuff, right? So, right, so you want to cut panel like that, right? Example. So I will typically draw my panels on a plane, right? On the surface of whatever I want to cut. Then I will go and Control W or group mask, right? And I'll have something like that, right? Panel lines or your this sub polygroups is very, very crucial to do this sort of thing. After you design your panel lines, you want to cut it out, right? Because you are polygrouping it, you can actually hide the colors, right? I have my panels here. Then I'll delete hidden, right? From here, I will go and extrude BZM for Zmodeler, back to Zmodeler, right? And then we can zoom in. So now there's a lot of very small faces, right? I want to zoom in, extrude all polygons. Then I will go and extrude outwards. You see, now my polygon from a plane become more 3D, right? But it's very crunchy looking, it's very ugly, right? So from here, what we can do to help us is, of course, to go and group by normals, right? Let's see, group by normals. Let me think about it. Okay, maybe not so fast. Let me think about it. We want to, okay, yeah, correct. Extrude first. Okay, extrude first. Then we can crease. Yes, crease first. After we extrude, we crease. Let's see, where's the crease button? Crease polygroups. So now we've got a hard edge between this part and the purple part, right? And the red part underneath, right? So the process is going to be the same for everything. So just for the ease of operation, I'll just go and take like one panel like that and just work on this one alone, right? We can split hidden. So we just work on this panel alone. Okay. So now we have this one. We can group by normals so that we have this flat face up here, right? And then we've got our purple face, red face below. Then we've got like this side stuff, right? We have to go and we can polish by group. We can polish crease edges. Yes, polish crease edges helps a lot, right? You can start to see that my faces start to become a lot more polished than previously because I'm polishing by crease edges. Then again, once you've done this function, you can always group again by normal, right? Now it is a lot more reasonable, right? Over here, that's where we need to go and get a little bit more involved than before. This is where we need to help the Zmodeler a little bit more. So we can do the crease. Let's see, crease. We go to edge mode, right? Crease edge. So I'm gonna crease one edge here. There's one edge here, just to let it know where I wanna have my hard edges. Right, you can crease here. Yeah, we can just close and hide all this. We can solo this and take a look. Right, we can crease this. Crease this. Right, and crease. So everything should be creased already. Right? With that said, then I can start to polish my hard edges even more. You see, just now it was a bit soft, right? We can polish by group, polish by crease edges. That's when it starts to really start to clean itself up, right? We can still use our regular brushes to help it a little bit, but I won't in this case. Right? So we want to make sure that it's really going to give us a hard edge on our panels, right? So we've got all these things. We can also help ourselves with a bit of polygrouping, right? BZM, yeah, BZM, right? And I can go and do it like that. Polygroup, polygroup a single poly. Right? Polygroup a poly, polygroup a poly here, right? Polygroup a poly here, polygroup a poly here, right? It may not be apparent what I'm doing at the moment. I think I missed out one edge. Polygroup a poly here, polygroup a poly here. Okay, then we can go and polygroup by islands. Right? We can start to fill in this as one edge, this as one edge, this as one edge. Right. Then again we can this polygroup just to make sure, right? So now then we can polish by groups. Right? You start to see that it starts to clean up. Starts to clean up a lot more. We can polish by edges. Right? So you can start to see that the hard surface shape that we want is starting to come up. Right? It's a lot, it's still like, it's a lot cleaner than before, but it's not perfect yet. Right? But we have our polygroups to help us. Right? From here, this is where we start to use Zremesher also to help us clean up our topology. Right? Right now it's very, what I will call this is a bit too much to make clean topology. Right? This is very messy and it's not clean at all. Right? So in Zremesher, right? In Zremesher, we have this bunch of functions. Zremesher, we have freeze border, freeze group, keep group, keep creases, target polygon, half, same, double, adapt, right? Most of the time, I mean, the school teach you to go and type in a target polygon count, but I tend not to use that. I typically just press keep your groups, right? Keep your creases, and half the polygon count. And then I turn off adaptive also. So adaptive basically shuffles your topology and puts more topology when there's more detail and less topology when there's less detail. But we are trying to create a clean base mesh. So that means that our topology needs to be even and regular, right? I turn off the smooth group also because I don't want to smooth. I want it to keep the same shape. Smooth, then it will average out. Keep, then it will try to maintain the borders, right? So with that, I'll press half, right? You can watch it slowly start to clean up. Right, so this is how I built my this is how I retopo in Zbrush, right? This is how I create a clean, as clean a base mesh as I can in Zbrush, right? So you can see it's starting to really clean up, right? With this look, I can really polish my crease edges to really get that flat edge. You see this flat edge here? 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 You see this flat edge here, right? Versus if you were to regularly try to soften it with a brush or whatever, right? The effect is simply not the same. Right, so I can still go cleaner for this thing, right? Half, right? Don't really like this, so you can still go back into your ZBrush to delete edge loop partial. You can delete this. Let's see. Let me think about this one. Okay, yeah, I think this should be fine. If you really don't like a face like this. No, actually, this is fine, right? So this is ideal low resolution base map for you to do like anything and everything that you want to do. You can polish by groups. Oh wait, my groups. So sometimes as you clean up your model, sometimes as the thing becomes lower and lower resolution, the colors of the polygroup may change. So you can actually just color it back, right? Polygroup, island. We take this color, we color this blue, right? Maybe this blue need to change color. So a single poly. Purple, purple, right? Purple, purple, purple. Crease back. It's the crease polygroup, right? So now we got a very low resolution base map, right? Based off what we want to build. Then from here, we can really do back the polishing up. So we divide again. Maybe we divide a few times, then we can polish by group. Huh? Yes. What's the question? Oh, how to change the color of the polygroup. So if you put your mouse on top, right? Huh? How to select which one is polygroup? Oh, so I'm back to Zmodeler mode, right? BZM. So I put my mouse over a face. Then I press the space bar. So under Zmodeler polygon actions, I have chosen to polygroup, right? I've chosen polygroup. Then I have a single poly, or you can do by poly loops, right? So what it does is it groups an edge loop, right? So you can group by edge loops. So if you are building something, right, then you want to group the loop, right? Then you can group the loop just by pressing like that, right? Then you'll loop around the whole thing. So it really helps if you got very good topology, and usually in order to have good topology, the base layer must have the perfect topology. So this is as perfect as I care to go for this type of thing. So I can polygroup by poly loop, right? That is how to do it, right? So you can polygroup a single poly, right? Or you can do a polygroup island. Basically, this whole island, you can polygroup it, right? So when you put your mouse, you can see that there's polygroup islands. Then alternative, if you press alternate, it's a new color. If you press shift, it is the color picker. So let's say I press it, right? Then I press alternate. I'm holding down the mouse button on my polygroup. So I'll click it and not let go. Then I'll tap alternate to change the color of my polygroup. Right? So you can choose different color, right? And then if I want to, it's a lot easier with bigger squares. So I'll just go down the resolution, right? So you can change the color of your polygroup by pressing your left click and not letting go. And then you just tap alternate to change the color to whatever you want, right? So if you have let's say you have different colors, right? And then you want to make this purple, you put your mouse over the color you want, you press down, you left click, then you press shift, right? Now it is in color picker mode. So now it is purple. So this is how you affect your polygroup. You can change the color, right? So you can smooth it out, right? Now you can see that I built like one panel, like we can polish this away, one panel on my armor, and then later on we can bring it back to our regular armor panel down there. Right? So we have a pop-up protruding piece of panel on our base armor, right? So typically my armor have a layer that is all my extrusion, like all my panel lines is a separate layer from my base thing. Sometimes you need some, then this lower resolution thing, you can keep it there, or you do whatever you want. You put it down, you just hide it. It doesn't need to be very high res, right? So on my meshes, I typically have a thing at the back to go and look like there's some depth and stuff to fill up the hole, right? A low resolution thing going on in the background, right? Right, a low res mesh all on the inside to fill up space. Then all the inside stuff can be low res. It doesn't really matter. What's more important is the high res stuff to make it look nice, right? So this is Zmodeler. This is sort of how to build clean panels and stuff using Zmodeler. So, right? So in Maya is to get such nice polish on, especially on round object, is very, very difficult. But in Zbrush, because you're using the polygroups and using all the various functions, right? It is very efficient and very fast. And you just let the system do its thing, right? Yeah. Yeah, so this is Zmodeler. Hello. Teaching them Zmodeler. Yeah. Yeah. So any other questions?
Why you a bitch?
Why you a bitch? Yeah.
Select just your polygroup and show it.
Oh, how do I select just one polygroup, right? So if you polygroup things, you can hide or showcase polygroup, right? You press, you can go down, right? Control Shift, and then you click the color that you want, right? Or you click it to hide, right? Then if you click it again, you show everything else, right? Yeah. So I turn off the double, right? So I can see this part, right? So if you polygroup, you can hide by polygroups, right? Control Shift and click, right? To deselect, right? But then you control click outside, Control Shift and outside to bring everything back, right? So Control Shift and Control Shift, and then you click to hide the polygroup, right? Then you press it to invert. You press the same polygroup to invert, but it inverts only one time, right? Then the rest is it will just minus away, right? So minus. Control Shift outside. Yeah. So Control Shift the color you want to hide it, right? On the first click is a hide. The second click is an invert. Oh wait, no. Second click, why does it not work? Yeah, first click is hide, second click is an invert, right? After you invert, then it starts on a minusing or a minus function, right? So you can isolate whatever is it that you want to see, right? So of course, I always have the double-sided thing here to toggle if I need to see double-sided or not. But sometimes it's very irritating, right? Everything is gone, right? You turn on double face, then you can see the double face. Right? Yeah, so this is a clean hard surface panel done in Zbrush. So really, it's all about polygroups. It's all about creases, and then it's all about making very clean topology, right? Because if it's clean, then it's very easy to polish, right? Yeah. Any more question? Oh, Booleans. Okay. So let's go into a little bit of Booleans, right? So let's see. Okay. So let's say we want to go and cut some Booleans, right? Again, we have to go and typically again I make a low res, but I make a copy of it. Or you don't really need to make a copy of Booleans. The Boolean function in Zbrush is very useful because it does not destroy your original topology. It's non-destructive, right? So let's say I want to cut a hole or cut a panel in this thing, right? I simply append a cutter object, right? Let's bring in this cube, right? Move and scale. So let's move this cube somewhere where I want to go and cut, right? Or let's have some fun and let's make it a weird shape, right? Make it a weird shape, right? Because if you cut a regular shape, it's fine. It's not very interesting. You cut a weird shape, right? So let's have this weird shape. We want to cut the hole out of this, right? So ZBrush works in a top-down sort of procedure. So the top thing is your main object, then anything below will be your cutter objects, right? So what we do is we put our main object, then we design some sort of cutter object that we want, and then we press live Boolean on top here, right? Now, ZBrush has all these different buttons, 1, 2, 3. This is your Boolean operation, combine, intersect, and in between, right? So we want this one to be our main object, and then we want the circle to be cut out. So we press this second button. So it does this cut out function, right? It does this cut out function, and you can still move it around, right? You can still move it around. What? Not yet. Later you see what I have. Because right now it's not affecting anything. It's fake in a sense, right? It doesn't do anything yet. So we can do things like that. We can even duplicate our cutter object and then do it live, right? We turn on the eye. Right? Where did it go? Oh, okay, there it is. Yeah. So we can go and cut something else. We can really affect the cutter object on live, right? This is in a sense live. This is called live Boolean. It's happening live, right? So once you cut out the shapes that you want, right? You can cut panel lines, you can cut whatever the hell you want, right? What we do to sort of confirm the operation is, okay, so one of the things is that you must turn off all the visibility on everything else, right? Because it will copy everything. What you do once you're done with whatever you want to Boolean is under subtool, right? You press Boolean and then you make Boolean mesh. right? So you click it, it will do its thing, okay? So after that, you don't see anything happening. Your Boolean object is actually in the append button. So you need to bring in the new Boolean object, right? So you bring it in. It doesn't appear on your mesh. So then you can turn off the live Boolean and turn off your original objects. So in that way, you actually keep your original objects in case your Boolean is messed up or you don't like it, right? So now we are looking at our new Boolean object. Then we can look at the wireframe, right? Of course, it is going to be messed up, but none of these things are n-gons. All of this is triangle or quads, right? So that's the power of Zbrush. Again, it does not let you make any n-gons, right? In Maya, if you do this, you will generate a lot of n-gons, and then it's going to be very difficult to fix, right? But in Zbrush, it does not do that, right? So let's clean this up. So we can, again, polygroup BZM, right? I'm going to polygroup island, right? I'm going to take this green and I'm going to paint this other half the same green color, right? Just to be sure. And then maybe this one, I'll take this blue and paint this thing blue color. So, right? And I paint this thing blue, right? Paint this face blue, right? So all of these things are blue. Then I'm going to let Zbrush know that this is going to be a hard edge that I want to cut. So again, crease polygroup. So you see it's formed this double dotted line along the polygroups that I've selected, right? So once I've done that, right, I'm going to keep groups, keep creases, turn off the smooth, turn off the adaptive, then Zremesh. Right, now it's clean. Now it's clean. One shot, I cleaned it up, right? Of course, it's high res, right? Of course, it's high res. So again, what we can do is we can halve it. If you want to clean it up, we can halve it. Of course, sometimes it messes up, right? Sometimes it messes up. So you do, if it does mess up, you need to give it more information. Divide, right? Then you can delete lower. So you get a higher resolution mesh. Then you can polish your crisp edges. You can polish by groups to clean it up, right? To get your very clean type of mesh. Then you can Zremesher it half again, right? Then you can halve it again. Sometimes it does that. So you need to check polish by groups. So sometimes it does mess up. So you need to help it a little bit by sort of reorganizing things a little bit, right? You can halve it again. Yeah, see, it's cleaning up. It's cleaning up. It's cleaning up and maintaining the shape. So sometimes it does that again. Polish a little bit. Just give it a little bit of help. Right? Polish. So you have this are done. So sometimes you've gone too far. So sometimes you've gone too far. Like this is still fine, right? So this may not be the topology you want. Right now, I'm halving every time. So I like this amount of polygons, right? 1527. I'm going to press the same, right? And press Zremesher and see whether that gives me a better result. Sometimes it does not. Then we try adaptive, right? So you need to experiment and play around with a little bit. Sometimes it does not do what you want also. You divide, then you delete lower, then you same and adapt just to try to make it something more regular, right? You want something more regular. So you can sort of reshuffle it. Then we go back to half, right? Oh, it messed up. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So we can get this and polish by group. Zremesh. Right? Zremesh. And Zremesh. Right? Yeah. So sometimes you just have to accept that this is perhaps as low as it wants to go. Right? But it's way cleaner than in Maya anyway, right? And then you still got all your clean faces on everything else. So sometimes perhaps you may need to retopologize a little bit just to clean it up. One of the good ways that I like to do is once you start to see loops starting to form, right, then you can really still use whatever you learned just now to help assist the system do what you want it to do, right? So you're gonna polygroup this loop, right? You're gonna give it some help, so it knows what to keep and what to not keep, right? And you can see that this is way more cleaner than in Maya anyway, right? Maya, you are just left with some trashy stuff and then you're like kind of stuck, right? Whereas this one, you can still go and do this. Then you can polish by group. Then you can keep groups, keep creases, right? Zremesh, right? Try to clean it, right? Yeah, see, it's cleaning up. It's giving me a lot more reasonable results, right? Sometimes you get a little bit of this, right? It's fine. Stitch 2 points together, right? You can still do that in Zbrush also. Everything you do in Maya, you can do in Zbrush, right? You can clean up a little bit, get cleaner and cleaner results. Polish by groups, right? Yeah, you see? I get cleaner and cleaner results. Of course, this part I was ignoring, but the process is the same. You want to, whatever funny shape or what, right? It helps, like the same like Maya, where you have your edge loops. In ZBrush, you have your polygroup loops, right? And then that gives you a lot of power because you're able to retain detail using the polygroups, right? And then you have a perfect whole that is very nice that you Boolean out from a very weird shape, right? Yeah, I mean, if you want it to still be strange or whatever is it, right? You just need to put more edges, right? So if you want a really strange shape, you will put more edges to go and maintain that shape, right? Edges and polygroups. Yeah. So this is that lah. Then we can bring back our original thing. Yeah. So we have a panel like that, right? So that's that. Yay. Sorry? Oh, knife curve, I don't use so much, right? If I want to go and cut something, I will tend to use, if I want to cut something, because knife curve will end up in triangles or weird cuts at places you don't want, right? I prefer more to use insert single edge loop to go and cut stuff, right? If your thing is all looped properly, then it should cut properly, right? So you can sort of check your topology also. If it loops round and round and round like that, something is wrong, probably on the behind part, right? So if we don't want the behind part, sometimes if I'm building panels, I tend to go and do stuff like that. BZM, polygroup, polyloop. You take this color, go this way. Right, I'll take this, I'll delete. Sometimes if the behind is very messed up or I didn't focus on it. Right? So I like to work on panels faced by on a single plane, right? I'll just delete hidden. I'll add the cuts I want, right? Let's say add a cut here. Right, then I will go and extrude all polygons like later. Once I finish the face, then I extrude it. Then I'll sort of flip. Yeah. Then it's clean on both sides. Yeah. So, but if you want to cut, also can Control Shift, right? Typically I don't use knife curve because it damages the thing. I'll use a slice curve, right? It cuts, but then you end up with weird stuff. You can if you really want to, right? But of course, after you do things like that, polygroup, polyloop, crease, half and half until you clean it up, right? I find this very messy. I like to have clean stuff all the time, every time. Yeah. You can still go and sort of slide these edge loops. If you need to slide stuff around, you still can, right? Yeah, you can slide, you can delete edge loop complete. You can do all the stuff in Maya inside ZBrush, right? You can delete, right? Don't use yeah.
One subscriber. I'm so
Yeah.
What the button next with sort.
What, this one? It's for Boolean.
Yeah,
union, intersect, and subtract. Yeah.
Now get out there and make your armor in 5 seconds and flex on the flex.
Yeah, now you must flex on people. You must shit on them when they say, oh, you can't do hard surface in ZBrush. They must just shit on them. Yeah. Shit on the people who say you can't do hard surface in ZBrush because you can. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching this episode of What's Up My Riggers.
What's up, my riggers? The time has come. This is my